Hey, everybody, it's Mike Dubord celebrating Memorial Weekend with my fellow veterans. This time with a gentleman by the name of
Mark Bonovetz.
Mark, where are you from?
Originally Bessemer, Michigan.
A Youper, a fellow Youper.
Born and raised. You got to bring some of that good Youper blood down here.
That's
and get
exactly
some.
Right. Big city of Escanaba.
Outstanding.
The Eskimos.
Yeah. Excellent.
1981 Class A state champs football, by the way.
Our 85 team played in the state championship down in the Pontiac Silverdome. The end of it didn't fare out well, but it was a great experience to be down there and be part of that. But cool. Being a Youper, you can't beat that.
Now, how long have you been in Wisconsin?
I've been in Wisconsin since 2001. We moved down here. So, yeah, I promised my wife when we got married, we were living up in Marquette, Michigan. I was going to Northern. I promised my wife that when I graduated, we'd move south. And we got to Green Bay, and she still hasn't got the joke 20 years later. So,
very good. All right, so you served U.S. Army.
I was in the U.S. Army, yes.
What was your MOS?
I was a 19 kilo. I was on the M1A1 Abrams tanks at the time. I believe now they're the A2 variant of it. And
driver, gunner, what?
All the above.
Yeah,
all the above. We had to cross train in everything and be a part of everything in that vehicle because realistically, you could technically run that vehicle with two people, your tank commander and your driver. Right. And so you kind of had to have that ability to do everything. Plus, we were in that time, I was in during the downtime where military was downsizing, the 92, 93 era, and personnel was getting out, so you had to kind of make do with 2-man, 3-man crews and stuff like that. So it was a great experience. Did a lot of really fun stuff, a lot of really cool stuff.
Where were you stationed at?
I was in Fort Bliss over in El Paso, Texas. Yes. Right. Yeah. So fortunately, never had to see any type of combat, never had to go into hostile zones.
Didn't have to go overseas?
Did have to do a small thing just outside of Saudi Arabia, but it was kind of an ash and trash deployment type of thing for practicing deployments. Okay. We would load our vehicles up on on train cars in El Paso. They would railhead them all the way over to Beaumont, Texas. They'd take everything off. They'd load it all up into cargo boats, put it out in the Gulf of Mexico, do a big lap, come back in and unload everything and send it back. So every time you see on the news, you see the train cars and people are saying that, they're practicing for an invasion or they're staging them. A lot of times they're just practicing deployment operations where they're sending it there.
That's what the military is all about when you're not in a combat zone. Practice, practice, practice.
And you have to. I mean, there's no way that you can become ready by just kind of sitting around and waiting for it and, resting on your morale. You just have to go ahead and start practice. So when it does happen, you hit the ground running.
So now that was after Desert Storm.
Correct. Yeah, that was after Desert Storm. That was a 92, 93.
Well, still a hot zone at that time.
It was. They were. Saddam still had the no-fly zone that was being enforced on him, and he was still testing the waters, dipping the toes in, and we kind of had to always be there to say, hey, hold your horses a little bit, and we did a really good job with that, making sure that they kept themselves in check with what was going on. But during the downsizing too, it was, I don't want to say it was kind of smoke and mirrors, but it kind of was a distraction to all the cuts and everything that were happening at the time. So we did do a lot of motor pool work, keeping our vehicles up to speed. We did one rotation at the National Training Center out in Fort Irwin, California, Death Valley. So if you've ever been to Death Valley in August, that whole thing about 100 degrees, well, it's a dry heat. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that's BS. Okay. If it's 110 degrees, it's 110 degrees. Okay. Yeah. And
listen, I was stationed in Central America under Ronald Reagan. This was during the Central American conflict. And I was a paratrooper with the 82nd, then got deployed to Central America. And my job as a gunner on the 81 millimeter mortar was to go into these countries, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and train their army and their National Guard with our weapon system. So in this case, the 81 millimeter mortar. I was literally training 13 and 14-year-old kids. That's who they were sending out into combat.
Yeah, and it's insane because I actually served, went through basic with a guy who was from Colombia, and he was, at the time he was 21, but he would tell us stories that when he was 13 years old, he served in the Colombian army before he became a U.S. citizen. 13. And he said it was under, the whole Pablo Escobar deal. And, right. And so he would be up on mountains with him and 2, 3 other guys, and they would be there for 3 to 6 months
Yeah.
with all their ammunition. And then people would bring food, drop in food. They would eat off the land and stuff. And it was, you don't leave this post, or you don't never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was crazy how when people come here, he was just tickled pink. He loved every bit of it. I mean, he was all part of, United States and what we were doing and what we were looking to do. And, he didn't have to serve in the U.S. military, but he saw what it was like elsewhere and thought that, this is kind of his chance to give back to this country that made him a citizen and made him part of it.
What does Memorial Day mean to you?
Memorial Day is it's very humbling and it's very somber to me. And it is one of those weekends where I do my best to try to myself honor those who gave their life, gave their all for this country. And it probably about 15 or so, I don't know, a little bit, maybe a little bit more than that. My mom shared with me a box, and she got this box from my grandmother, and it was the letters that my grandfather, who was in a Marine in World War II, he's in the 2nd Marine Division, wrote to my grandmother while he was on a boat somewhere. I was over in Hawaii preparing for the Battle of Tarawa. They were getting ready for that. And when you start going through and reading all this and thinking nowadays, all you got to do is pick up a phone and FaceTime, Snapchat, do whatever you got to do. You write a letter, it's weeks before people, somebody could get a letter and by then you could be, 2 weeks deceased by then or not have a clue. And so the more we started reading the letters, I got to one where it actually described his landing on the beach and what was happening. And if you've ever seen anything on the Battle of Tarawa or watched any of the documentaries, I've been listening to some Odyssey books on Tarawa and some of the other issues with that. And it is just amazing how, that the resiliency of some of these Marines, because back then the soldiers on the Japanese side, they had nothing to lose. They were just absolutely relentless, and they were dug in. And the more I started reading this and seeing what it took, is like all it would have taken was an errant bullet or a mortar round or something, and I would not be here right now, based on how close he came to that. And then you think about the tens and hundreds of thousands of men and women who put their lives on the line through World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all the different conflicts, all the different deployments, being overplayed, Central America, having to train people. And you realize the way that our lives could definitely have been changed by different things. And so when it comes to the weekend, what I usually do is I head back up to the UP. My grandfather's buried up at the cemetery up in Bessemer, Michigan. And so I spend my time up there. We have a cabin up on Lake Ogebic up there.
Nice.
And that was him and my grandmother. It's going to be their retirement place.
Wow.
And never got to realize that he actually died when I was 3 months old.
Wow.
So I never got to meet him other than through letters and from what my mom and my uncle told me. And it just is my way of, it's a little symbol of it. And, it takes me away. My family sometimes comes up. They sometimes just kind of let me do my thing, but it's kind of my way of memorializing and honoring his memory, as well as the honoring and the memory of the other ones. There's, you can say a lot of things. I know there's a lot of people that say a lot of things, but it's the ones that do. There's a lot of stuff that do. People that do. And to me, that is probably the most important part of what goes on with it are those that do. With our group, the Desert Veterans of Wisconsin, we have a lot of people that do. We put a lot of time that, there's no paid members. It's all volunteers. We met again last night. We all work jobs. We all have real lives. These are things that we do on the side, and everybody comes in their work gear and they're tired, but yet they get it. They understand. And so, there's ways that we have to give back. That way it's mine.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you stopping by to have this little chat with us, and from all of us at Duke FM, thank you for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for yours. I appreciate everything that you do for the veterans as well. And I know that, your service and stuff is totally honorable, but you spend a lot of time promoting what veterans do in general to everybody. And it makes a world of difference, because without people like you get our message across. You get everybody's message across. And I think that is in itself more admirable than you can possibly imagine. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. Celebrating Memorial Weekend with Duke FM.